And so I was curious, well, what about those groups that don't seem to care about the environment or seem to resist it, if you will. And so I was getting invitations to more conservative, evangelical churches who had some sort of environmental thing. And what I usually encountered there was something along the following lines. They'd say, so I was working for Interfaith Power and Light. I was the founding director for Ohio Interfaith Power and Light, which is now renamed to Ohioans for Sustainable Change. And
Mm.
I got invited to a church once to speak about Ohio Interfaith Power and Light. And they asked me sort of on the side, why do you guys call it Interfaith Power and Light? Why don't you just call it Faith Power and Light? And I was trying to orient like figure out, wait, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it became clear that the concern was there's often an agenda with interfaith groups that everybody's got to think of things in this way, otherwise it
Mm.
doesn't count or something like that. Where why can't we just be the people we are of faith that we are? Like
Mm.
we already care about the environment. We don't need to change our beliefs in order to care about the environment. And I heard a very interesting story from is one of the largest churches in Ohio, but it's politically complex. It's sort of like bordering towards that 50-50% of who's in that congregation, but they have an evangelical identity. And I knew someone on the staff there, staff of like 100 people in this church. And he said, yeah, about half of them are like climate change, let's do something, and half of them are climate change is a hoax. And
Mm.
and they had a staff meeting. The senior pastor was telling me one time they had a staff meeting where some of the more environmentally enthusiastic staff were saying, let's green the church. We, insulate things. And then another group was like, wait, no, what are you? No. And the pastor told me, he said, I saw what was happening real quick, and it's hard to rewind the tape on things, but he said I pretended to blow a whistle like foul, I said, hey, everybody, stop. Let's not talk
Mhm.
about it this way. He said, how about we think of it this way? And he said, we have a huge sanctuary that takes a lot of energy to heat it. We have a building that probably needs an energy audit because we can probably save $100,000 or $200,000 a year on energy alone if we can insulate the windows and the walls and caulk the windows and do some of this kinds of best practices. And if we do that, we'll be saving a lot of money that we can put towards our other ministries.
Mm.
And suddenly the people who'd been opposing this green the church thing said, oh, well, why didn't you just say that in the first place? That's a no-brainer. Of course we should do that.
Mm.
But just don't go calling it greening the church.
Yeah.
Right. So, and
Right.
and as I explored this more deeply, I realized that the resistance was not to caring for God's creation at all. There's a deep and profound ethic of wanting to care for God's creation that I think is shared across almost all traditions. But joining the environmental movement or being
Mm.
called an environmentalist, like the opposition is not to doing good environmental things. The opposition is to sort of, I guess I would say, to sort of the liberal progressive approach to environmental change. I've heard that very directly as well. We want to do environmental things, but we don't want to join some environmental bandwagon.
Mhm.
So I think
Mm.
that's a really important part of the complexity of the landscape that's out there, is that in most cases, it appears that religion, if anything, probably reinforces positive environmental values, or at least it should, any religion worth its salt. But culturally, it's a lot more complex than that. And
Yeah.
the same kind of culture war and political oppositions that are so polarized in the US right now are more influential than religion itself.
Mm.
It seems pretty clear, especially things like climate change.